Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Collectors Emporium CPC. I am Courtney, and I'm here with Tyson today, and we're going into our round three, which I'm very excited about, especially after seeing the last two sets. So, what have been your thoughts so far, Tyson? I know my thoughts are a little crazy right now, truthfully.
Your thoughts are crazy because you've gotten to see your Clefairy and your Calyrex Shadow, and then you got to see another Calyrex Shadow with a bug move on it. So
hmm
you're ecstatic right now, and I'm ecstatic too to see all sorts of different versions. We saw the Miraidon team, kind of the staple team. We've seen two very different versions of Calyrex Shadow, kind of the bulky one where it's able to sit there, click Nasty Plot, and then do its damage. And then we saw one with choice specs able to do tons of damage just off the bat with a wheezing Maushold that we didn't see come to the game. Tons of different stuff there at the Calyrex Shadows. We also got to see a really cool hard Trick Room team that did really well recently. So seeing it actually in another tournament is also really exciting to watch as well and see what it does. We didn't get to see the Smeargle that game, but having the really cool tools like the Choice Bandit Urshifu, we've kind of got to see parallels of all sorts of different Pokemon today. So like Urshifu Water, Urshifu Dark, Calyrex Ice, Calyrex Shadow. I don't know what the parallel is for like the Paradox Pokemon, Raging Bolt. I don't know. If someone brings Raikou, maybe. I don't know, but I don't think so. But you never know.
I'm just saying, I would go bananas for Raikou, especially. But for me, I think really my the biggest surprise today has been that Galarian wheezing and how masterfully Vincent Matteo played that into that last set. I'm extremely excited to kind of see if Vincent's going to keep climbing the ranks. He's starting out 2-0, which is fantastic. And I really would love to see kind of where they go ahead and take it after this, too. But I think you're right. Hard Trick Room, especially after this last weekend in Stockholm, has really been making a splash. And I know every single Hard Trick Room enjoyer is reminiscing right now and how amazing that this is in this current regulation. But I think we also need to keep in mind is that once again, as we know, I am not the biggest Calyrex Ice Rider fan. And, you know, I'm not saying
Yeah.
I'm praying on its downfall, but
I mean, it did
just
just lose the last round of Swiss. Unfortunately, I am the same. I'm like the opposite. I want it to do so well. It's such a fun Pokemon to me. I love the Ice type moves, and it looks like my cat Zeus also likes the Ice type moves of that Calyrex, and he likes to use them. But we're not going to be able to click them today, buddy. The Calyrex Shadows are kind of tearing us down. The choice specs, the Citrus Berry are going to be able to do so much damage, and like they either do so much damage or with like something like the citrus berry, they just live forever that they're not able to do as much to you because you have something like the Clefairy on the side, and they just kind of sit there and do their thing. And that takes a lot of skill for the Calyrex player to maneuver around. If you are the hard Trick Room player, you kind of have to use your turns wisely. You only have 5 turns of Trick Room or the 4 turns of Tailwind and stuff like that. So you have to be very conscious of how you're using your speed control, whether that's the Trick Room or the Tailwind, for
oh,
both the Calyrex Shadow players and the Ice Rider players.
oh no, 100%. And I think one thing that we also kind of have to keep in mind as we're going into this game three is these new two trainers that are going ahead and going to be sitting down for our live stream and their teams. Because talk about interesting Pokemon. Let me tell you. Starting off, we're going to have Noah Pielow on one side with a Grimmsnarl with Light Clay, Raging Bolt with an Assault Vest, Ogre Hearth Flame. We got a Zamazenta. There it is. Where I was going to be here sometime. A Champa with a Focus Sash and a Choice Scarf Rapid Strike Urshifu. And then on Andrew Kornfield's side, we've got an Iron Crown. And I just know that Justin Karras is ecstatic about this one. Running that Expert Belt, a Farigiraf with that Electric Seed, Ogre Hearthflame, once again making a comeback, Blood Moon, Ursaluna with a Life Orb, Whimsicott with the Focus Sash, and Rhydon, of course, wearing its trusty little choice specs. So two very interesting teams, but also a little weird. I'm kind of surprised by this. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I actually want to touch on Andrew's team before we touch on Noah's, where I think Noah's team is more of like a normal Zamazenta team, but there's still stuff to talk about there. But I'm really interested in Andrew's team, where I think normally you have the Furgraf, Ogerpon, Whimsicott, and Miraidon, but instead of the Iron Hands and opting for a bulky bulky piece, you kind of have this offensive Blood Moon Ursa Luna as well as the Iron Crown as well. But really, the Iron Crown is not something you see on the Miraidon teams because normally, right, you see it on those expanding force teams, those teams that might like to go a little bit faster, or have maybe like a side trigger mode. Honestly, just the expanding force teams is what you see it on. Its Quark Drive ability doesn't really synergize too well with Miraidon besides Tachyon Cutter. You mainly want to use it because it gets access to Expanding Force. So I'm really interested to see what Andrew does with it here using its Quark Drive. It's also opted for an Expert Belt on this team, so it's going to be able to do a little bit more damage when it hits super effectively. That with like a Tachyon Cutter, maybe to pick up a KO on a Fluttermane, or something like a Psychic move, or potentially whatever coverage move it decides to run as well into the opposing Pokemon. The Expert Belt actually might come up as well if you are Tachyon Cuttering into something like the Grimmsnarl. The other piece on this team that isn't normal is the Blood Moon Ursaluna, opting for that Life Orb, which is normal. Those Terra Normal Blood Moons are going to do lots of damage under Tailwind.
Oh yeah, and I think you bringing that up for that Grimmsnarl is such a pivotal thing to kind of keep in mind, especially for me, as Grimmsnarl is one of those pesky Pokemon that I feel like I always match up into and I always don't have an answer for. And so Noah having that on their team is really fascinating to really just kind of disrupt that flow by putting up those screens, causing a little bit of havoc, making things a little bit, maybe a little bit more grim for Andrew on their side of the field, but also running that typical raging bolt with that assault vest and that ogre pond kind of in tow with it too. But Zamazenza is always in a comfortable position, especially when we're talking about having that wide guard, when you're looking at that Ursa Luna, and especially looking at like that for Rigorap as well, making sure that if you need to go ahead and use those different types of moves that you have it. And then Chiempao. Of course, I am a lover of Chiempao, and it makes me so happy to see it. And that is one of those Pokemon I feel like at the beginning of this regulation, we really didn't see a whole lot of. We really kind of saw that a lot of people were pushing it to the side, but now I feel like it's really starting to make that momentum come back, especially with that devastating sucker punch that it can come out with. Although, one thing Noah has to keep in mind is that for Rigoraph and making sure that, hey, that Armor Tail will go ahead and shut down all of those different types of things on that side. And that Urshifu with that Choice Scarf is making sure that, hey, you can move fast, but I'm probably going to move faster. So, really fascinating team on Noah's side as well. And once again, if you have ever gone to any of the tri state locals, you know both of these players good and well, both fantastic trainers, and also really great team builders, as we can see with these crazy teams that they brought up for this PC today.
Yeah, Noah here opting, as you kind of said before. You touched on a lot of the pieces there. A very interesting team, very basic, but still very interesting in a way that it can be piloted. And some of the small moves on here, or small item choices, I should say, that we normally don't get to see, like the Soul Vest on Raging Bull. That's kind of normal. A lot of people opt for either the Life Orb, I believe, or Goggles, but the Assault Vest there makes a lot of sense as well to give the team some special bulk compared to the Zamazenta, who definitely has you covered on the defensive end. I think not only is its massive defense stat big enough, but I think its Rusted Shield plus the ability that it gets, Dauntless Shield allows you to get that extra +1 defense is going to be super huge there. And then Choice Scarf on the Urshifu as well is just able to move super, super fast, as you kind of said before. The Grimmsnarl also a very annoying piece too.
Every time I feel like I face a Grimmsnarl, I am always just kind of feel like I'm behind the eight ball because that Grimmsnarl is just so powerful with those different types of screens. And it really makes my brain work a lot harder with all those different calcs that I have to keep in mind too. But I think Andrew is going to have to really figure out what is a good way around that, especially with their current team. I'm a really big fan of Ursa Luna Blood Moon. I think it's just so powerful, especially when if you go for those hyper voices, those blood moons, or even like an earth power. It can do so much damage, especially paired with that life orb too. And that Miraidon, as we've talked about again and again and again, Miraidon is truly such a disruptor with that terrain, really causing some issues. And as we can kind of see on Noah's side, he doesn't really have an answer for that currently. So it's going to be interesting to see how Noah is going to play around this Miraidon and see, hey, I know you're going to be able to have that electric train up, but how am I going to not let you use it that well?
Yeah, and I think mastering that or kind of positioning around that is going to be the big thing here. Not having access to terrain and kind of having to play around your resists and bulk in just general bulk is something I think a lot of players struggle with. So being able to play around that is going to be super, super interesting to watch as we get into team preview here. Waiting for both of our players to kind of lock in their teams and make their selections in before going into game one. I think an interesting lead there for Noah could be something like the Zamazenta Ogre Pawn to redirect any of the attacks that either the Miraidon or Iron Crown could throw out, even potentially a Blood Moon if you're willing to sacrifice it, while the Zamazenta can fire off things like the Body Press or Heavy Slams into the opposing Pokemon. One thing I do think you do have to be careful of is allowing Noah to set up the screens with Grimmsnarl if he does decide to opt into it. The cool thing about Grimmsnarl being a dark type is that it can't get encored by the Whimsicott as it is immune to those prankster moves. So if you do go for a screen with your Grimmsnarl, if you are Noah, you don't have to worry about Andrew's Whimsicott going for those pesky encores. You do have to worry about Tachyon Cutter and Moonblast though.
Yeah, I do think that for me, a person that Grimstar out front would be such an amazing lead for Noah to really go ahead, as you were kind of saying, is that sensitive, is that dark type. Answer means nothing. You can't play any games with me. But what game we can go ahead and play is getting into our round three, as we see Andrew going ahead and leading that Miraidon in tow with, of course, Iron Crown? Crazy to see that. But then on Noah's side, we do set that Qianpao and that Grimmsnarl paired right up to it. So we are seeing that Grimmsnarl lead on Noah's side, probably to go ahead and start setting up those screens and just applying that pressure, especially with Qianpao next to it, having that focus sash, knowing that it can take 2 hits regardless of what you bring it that way.
Yeah, and what's really interesting here is that we're going to see the Thunder Wave go out there, slow down the Iron Crown there. This Qianpao is going to move before it, hopefully, there. And with something like Ice Spinner as well, you're going to be able to remove terrain. But Andrew's Miraidon is going to move first before the Qianpao, maybe alluding to some speed tiers there. The Qianpao is going to be able to get off the spinner, but what slot is it into? I'm really curious here.
Yeah, and I think when we saw that Volt Switch going into that Grimmsnarl did so much damage, and we see that Farigiraf takes that spot of that Miraidon previously, and that Ice Spinner from Qianpao going into that Farigiraf slot, only doing about maybe 20-25%. Really great switch done by Andrew, and making sure that it really kind of disrespected on that side, and that Qianpao going down to its sash.
Yeah, and Tachyon Cutter able to get the 2 guaranteed hits there, that multi-hitting move, able to break that focus sash from the Qianpao. This is kind of an awkward lead, and why I didn't really want to lead the Qianpao into Andrew's team. Yes, you have something like the Ice Spinner, but you really need some bulky Pokemon to deal with this Iron Crown, otherwise it's just going to kind of tear through you, and you kind of lost your Qianpao for nothing. You lost it for maybe a fourth of the Farigiraf HP there, and the terrain is still intact with Andrew's Miraidon, who is comfortable in the back as Grimmsnarl goes for a light screen here. As long as the Terrakion, Iron Crown does not get paralyzed here, it will be able to go from the Tachyon Cutter into this Grimmsnarl as it does, and it's able to finish off the Grimmsnarl. So now you've lost 2 Pokemon for effectively a 1/4 damage and a light screen, and this Raging Bull goes for a Snarl as well. Not able to do too much, but I guess lowering the attack of this Iron Crown.
Yeah, no, I think Miraidon is sitting back on the bench on Andrew's side, enjoying the nice scenery that is around it right now. Maybe taking a lounge on the beach, ready for its next time when it comes in. But we do see that Farigiraf going for that Trick Room, really going ahead and making things a little bit more in Andrew's favor, making sure that that speed is no longer there and no longer an issue for Andrew on that side. As we see that Zamazenta coming in as Noah's last Pokemon. And we do see that terrestrialization going off on Andrew's side of the field, going into that Iron Crown. Very interesting going into that terrestrialized ground. I love the ground terrestrialization. Can I just say that?
Yeah,
It's amazing.
absolutely. Not only does it look pretty, but it has potentially a lot of synergy on this team if Andrew decides to opt to run something like the Discharge on the Miraidon. Could have a lot of synergy there. The ground also allows you to hit electric types like this Raging Bolt. But with the light screen and the -1 and the Assault Vest, all those modifiers, unfortunately, the Iron Crown is not going to be able to do much. And now that's -2 if you are Andrews there. The body press is able to finish the Iron Crown, but I think if you're Andrew, you're very, very happy with how much value you were able to get out of this.
Oh, for sure. I think that Roaring Moon is just one of those Pokemon, especially with that Assault Vest, is just so bulky. I know it's one of those Pokemon that I hate to see on my opponent's team sheet, but I know one thing that Noah is hating to see as well is that Ursaluna Blood Moon sitting across from it in Trick Room. This is going to be a very tricky situation for Noah to kind of get out of this, especially with that Ursaluna kind of sitting on Andrew's field pretty comfortably, as we see that terrestrialization going into that Roaring Moon, going out and terrestrializing into that Fairy type. Of course, very defensive, very bulky. What else could you ask for with a Raging Bolt?
Yeah, and Andrew going for the helping hand here, knowing the Fergraph is just the helping hand bot. The Earth Power goes into the Raging Bolt instead of something like the Blood Moon. Very interesting play there. I would think if you go for the Blood Moon, that gets the knockout regardless. Snarl going into the Ursaluna and Fergraph, though, able to get the knockout there on the Fergraph. And something with the body press here should be able to wrap it up. And because Miraidon is in the back for Andrew, we already know Trick Room is actually going to kind of hurt Andrew here in this endgame.
Yeah, very interesting that Ursaluna getting completely knocked out with that body press, leaving Andrew just that lone Miraidon, which is interesting to kind of see because as you were saying, that Miraidon is pretty speedy and it's not really liking this Trick Room on that side. But we do see the electric terrain coming back up on Andrew's side. Of course, it's something that, you know, Miraidon loves to have in tow, but this is actually going to be a very tricky endgame for Andrew. And if he can get out of this, especially with Noah putting so much pressure on, having that wide guard, and also having that Raging Bolt sitting there pretty comfortably at this point. I think you were right, Tyson. That Blood Moon really would have done a lot of damage onto that Raging Bolt, but we saw that the Draco Meteor did even more damage and takes out Andrew's Miraidon, putting Noah up 1 in this set.
Yeah, I think what was really interesting in that turn is that if you were the Blood Moon there from Andrew, if you do go for the Blood Moon and able to get a knockout in the Raging Bull instead of getting a little greedy and going for the super effective Earth Power there, if you're going to helping hand, you might as well commit all the way. If you are going to Earth Power, you Earth Power into the Zamazenta slot, but I think against Zamazenta, the Miraidon should be able to win the 1v1 compared to the Raging Bolt with the AV and the light screen. So your best bet is the Zamazenta. If you do Blood Moon there, you're able to knock out the Raging Bolt, and then it's a 1v1, assuming Body Press is just able to knock out the Ursaluna there. And hey, if Ursaluna gets to live on 1 HP or something by some miraculous miracle, that's only a positive, right? It's just more a cherry on top. But because your Ursaluna did go down and you weren't able to get even one knockout there, the Miraidon cannot deal with 2 Pokemon in that scenario, especially when it's staring down a super effective Draco Meteor.
Exactly.
I think in game 2, if you are Noah, I want to see a little bit of a different lead. Maybe not 2 Pokemon that are weak to that Tachyon Cutter that seem kind of be the bane of Noah's game plan there. I'd like to see something maybe like, if you are going to lead one of those weaknesses, maybe something like the Ogre Pawn or the Zamazenta to kind of have those resistances to maybe deal with the Tachyon Cutter menace, Iron Crown itself.
Yes, I was really thinking maybe Grim paired into something like, let's say, a Grimmsnarl with Ogre Pawn or Grimmsnarl with Zamazenta. I think those would be in good tandem. I think that Grimmsnarl really did a lot for Noah in that last set, but as we both kind of discussed, that Shampoo did not. But we'll go ahead and see what our leads are, if they've changed, if they've stayed on each side of the player's field. We see Andrew's going to go ahead and lead with that Farigiraf and that Miraidon, while Noah leads with that Shampoo Grimmsnarl lead again. Very surprising for me, especially after seeing not a lot of work that Shampoo did in game 1 from Noah's side.
I mean, Noah did win the game. I critique Noah's lead a little bit, but I mean, hey, if you won the game 1, then why change it?
Yeah, a win is a win. A win is a win, truly. And I think that's going to be interesting. I think Noah's feeling very confident about this. But we'll go ahead and see kind of on Andrew's side. As the traders go ahead and lock in their moves, we see that Andrew is going to go ahead and go for that terrestrialization over onto that Miraidon, of course. And Miraidon does not want to take anything that's coming its way, and we see that terrestrialization of electric. So making sure that, with that terrain boost and that terrestrialization, that you're very, very strong, that you can go ahead and take all of that. We see that Electrodrift going into that Grimmsnarl, going ahead and making it a one-hit KO on Andrew's side into that Grimmsnarl. What a interesting and perfect play on for Andrew, as we see that Ice Spinner going into that Miraidon, taking it down to half. So honestly, a fantastic turn one for Andrew as we go ahead and break that Focus Sash with that ball play coming into that FERALIGATR and a Raging Bolt entering in the field on Noah's side. I truthfully think that terrestrialization on that Miraidon, making sure that you got rid of that Grimmsnarl, was fantastic. Awesome. When we go ahead and see on Andrew's side, we withdraw that Miraidon because obviously we don't want that Miraidon to play any single games in there. And we go ahead and see that Ogerpon is now entering the field on Andrew's side. You know, it's one of those Pokemon that loves to be on the field, especially in these types of situations. We see the Champao protecting on Noah's side, and that Snarl going into both that FERALIGATR and that Ogerpon, getting that special attack drop, of course, on both of those Pokemon on Andrew's side. We do see the Trick Room going up on Andrew's side to really go ahead and start changing the flow of this. Maybe turn it completely upside down. As we both know that Qianpao is a very speedy cat and does not like to be in this Trick Room situation.
Yeah, and seeing this Raging Bolt and Qianpao here on the field against this Ogerpon Hearthflame is kind of dangerous. The Psychic Noise there against Raging Bolt. Not that Raging Bolt has any healing moves, but if it did, it can't heal anymore. Snarl going off there, making sure the FERALIGATR can do even less with those Psychic Noises. Ogerpon not being too affected by it, but definitely able to do lots of damage here. Attacking into the Champao there, knocking it out completely, considering that Focus Sash was before.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that Champao did a little bit more in this game. However, it really still didn't do that much, in my opinion. As we see that Noah's going to go ahead and get into his Zamazenta, and Andrew right now is kind of sitting pretty comfortably with 4 Pokemon on his side, while Noah's currently down to his last 2, that Raging Bolt that does have Assault Vest and is really not taking any damage, and that Zamazenta. This is going to be very interesting. We still have our Trick Room up on Andrew's side. We still have not seen the last Pokemon on Andrew's side, so we don't really know if is it going to be that Iron Crown? Is it going to be that Ursaluna? We'll just have to kind of wait and see of what Andrew is going to do.
I mean, we kind of saw this last game where Noah was down to their last 2 Pokemon, that being the Raging Bull and the Zamazenta exactly, and they were able to kind of clutch it out. But the difference this time around is that Andrew does have a lot of their Pokemon as well, and they're not staring down on Blood Moon this time. The Ogerpon there is able to do lots of damage with this Pokemon. The Spiky Shield comes out there. Zamazenta goes for Protect as well. Neither Pokemon willing to let damage come to them. Noah's Pokemon, the Psychic Noise from Andrew, is not going to be able to hit the Zamazenta. Let's see what Noah's Raging Bolt decides to do. Goes for Draco Meteor into that Protect. Nothing really happened this turn, and the Protect is burned on both sides.
Yeah, and I think that, honestly, the biggest thing that did happen this turn is one of the turn of Trick Rooms went ahead and gone away. And so I think that's one thing Andrew has to keep in mind, is that you have a limited amount of turns of Trick Room, and you need to make sure that you are respecting that, especially with kind of how your team composition is. We know, as we know from last turn, that Miraidon really doesn't like to be in that Trick Room situation, so maybe that's what Andrew's kind of holding off for. But that Ogerpon is still playing a very pivotal piece when we're kind of looking at this crypt board state. We said that Ivy Cudgel going into that Zamazenta, taking it a huge hit, but that body press going right back onto it and getting the knockout on that Hearthflame Ogerpon on Andrew Kornfeld's side of the field.
Yeah, and that's a really big knockout. No, they're kind of popping off. Andrew was maybe hoping for an Ivy Cudgel trick to kind of speed up the game. This Ursaluna, though, onto the Trick Room. Last turn, you could go for protecting the Zamazenta, but we know that this Blood Moon could do a lot of damage to the Raging Bolt. With a helping hand and a blood moon, because of this HP range, you should be able to live. If you don't terrasilize though, an earth power might knock you out. Let's see. Instead it goes into the Zamazenta. Wow, not even respecting the
Wow.
protect that could come out that turn. Against the last turn trick room.
Yeah, I think what Andrew kind of took from the last game is that he knew that Noah was pretty okay with going ahead and doing a lot more damage and being a little bit more aggressive as he went ahead and did that body press into that Ursa Luna, taking it out. And you know what? Andrew was like, hey, if you're not gonna protect, I'm going to go ahead and make sure that Zamazenta goes down because that Zamazenta is kind of an annoying Pokemon for that Miraidon in the back. However, as we both know good and well, is that that Raging Bolt is one bulky Pokemon, especially with that Assault Vest tied to it.
Yeah, and the thing is Andrew has to make a call here. Electro Drift going into Noah's Pokemon. This is an amazing turn because Noah didn't opt to Terastallize. So this is going to be a resisted hit, doing no damage. And if Draco Meteor is able to land into this Ursa Luna, you're going to get a knockout.
Wow. What an impressive turn done by Noah, making sure saying, hey, you're Terra Electric. You're in your electric terrain. Obviously, you're going to use electric moves. I'm not, there's no reason for me to terrestrialize at this point, but there is a reason for me to get rid of this Ursa Luna. And that is what Noah did, taking out that with that Draco Meteor, eating up these electric drifts from Miraidon and going for another Draco into that Miraidon, getting it down into the red. And then we go ahead and see that the electro drift is once again going into Noah's Raging Bolt. And it's going to say, I'll take those for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. As we can see that it's not going to take it out. You see the Draco Meteor going into the Miraidon once again and knocking out Miraidon on Andrew's side of the field. We go ahead and see that Noah is going to win this round 3 set and continue to advance into the Collector's Emporium PC. What an amazing game. Ah, I love Pokemon. Let me just say that. I think some key takeaways, especially when we're kind of talking about that game too, and especially for Andrew's side, is I feel like they didn't really bring into that Ursa Luna very much. I feel like they didn't really play into the trick room needs and things like that. They were being very cautious with it. They didn't apply enough pressure, and Noah really took advantage of that. And it's one of those things. It's like it's kind of trying to weigh those different types of turns, especially when you're talking about Tailwind, or with Trick Room as well of like, hey, what am I going to do and how am I going to optimize it as well? So I think that was an amazing set by both trainers. And I think it's one of those things I'm so excited to kind of see what comes out next. We saw the Iron Crown, we saw the Grimmsnarl, we've seen Galarian Weezing, we've seen Clefairy. What weird Pokemon do we have next in the Collector's Emporium PC? We'll find out after this break, and we'll see you guys soon.